Welcome to the Apartment Operators Podcast, where you can learn from experienced operators what it really means to be an apartment operator. No fluff, no sugarcoating, just the raw, unfiltered truth of the ups and downs of operating multifamily communities.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Apartment Operator Podcast. I'm the host, Joseph Goslan, and today we have Steve and Michelle with us to tell us about their organization and their operations. Steve, welcome to the show. Let's get started with you. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your portfolio, what are you guys doing, and then we'll switch over to Michelle.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks for having us, Joseph. I'm Steve Firestone. My company is Crown Bay Group. I started that about 6 or a little bit more years ago. We started buying multifamily or larger multifamily from about 2015. I think is when we really started ramping up and getting our first deals done. I have done about 13 deals total over the last 5 years. We've probably gone full cycle at about 6 or maybe even more properties. Mostly C space properties, C plus properties, anywhere from roughly 100 units up to 300 and something per property. At our peak, it was probably just about 2,000 units, and a lot of them were, we were lucky enough to hit our long-term or 5-year sort of goals in like 2 years. So we sold off a lot of stuff as we hit our projections. And last year, really good with hindsight now, but we sold about 4, if not 5 properties last year. By December, we were all done and waiting to sort of take up the next space of us scaling up the company. And then, of course, this happened with COVID, what's happening now. And sort of put a little bit of a damper on that, but I was happy that we sold off a lot of stuff. So now we're just really ramping up, despite what's happening, of the next phase of growing Crown Bay Group. Michelle actually is our director of operations. She runs Crown Bay Management. We have our own separate management company that mostly just runs our own properties right now. We have been doing it for about 3 years, and that's it.
That's awesome. Michelle, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
How did you join the group?
I joined Steve 3.5 years ago when he started Crown Bay Management. I've been in the business for 31 years now, started out as a leasing agent, worked my way up. I've done everything from brand new construction, building properties from the ground up, to foreclosures, receiverships, and anything in between. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, get the hell out as fast as your feet will take you. So I've done it all. There's not much I haven't experienced in property management in my 31 years. And it's definitely a fun job.
It definitely keeps you on your toes.
Every day it's something new.
Okay, so awesome. So we're kind of jumping straight into the question we ask all of our operators, third party versus self-management. And it sounds like you made the transition from third party to self-management about 3 years ago. What was the driver there, Steve, to switch over?
I mean, at first it was, like I guess everybody thinks you need a management company to trust when you're first starting out. And, I spoke to most of the management companies, at least in this market in Atlanta where we started buying, and picked out a company that I, started a, sort of relationship with that I thought would be good, pretty good reputation. It was okay until you know better. It's only once you're more knowledgeable when you start finding out how not okay it really is. So we did that for a while, a couple of years, and things just weren't going right. I felt a lot like I was paying them and I still had to look over their shoulder. So I know that's a sort of asset management, but it's not really what I intended to do, to have to keep an eye on them. They should know what they're doing. And as we took over properties from other operators and other management companies, that's when you really start finding out that a lot of them, most of them, are all the same. And really with management companies, that your interests really aren't aligned. I mean, at the end of the day, their reputation is built on running your properties properly. So, there is something to that. But on the other hand, they're also, and usually the top people that are running the company are interested in building their company. So you really just get pushed up onto, a regional manager and whatever staff she hires or he hires. And you're only as good, it doesn't matter about the company, you're almost only as good as the people who they hire and who's keeping an eye on them. And half the time, you don't even have a regional manager that is that great. So nobody is sort of checking them. So it really just was a big mess. And I, thought about starting a management company like I'm sure everybody does when, you always think, oh, when I get to that number, whatever it is that people tell you have to have to make it viable. And unless someone pushes you into it, which is what happened to me. Sometimes you need a push to get started in anything in life, So, Michelle was working for a big company for quite a while, running a huge portfolio, which was nationwide from here where we are. And, funny enough, I had met her and another guy that worked there when I first came here, and we had lunch, and they were trying to, get my business as management. And then I didn't, really think about it that much or talk to Michelle again for years. And, but I was friendly-ish I got friendly with basically what her boss, or was the president of their company, and, sort of friendly-ish. And then he called me one day, and I found out, or he told me he was leaving, retiring, or, moving on after he'd been there for a long time. And then that was about 2 months later, he called me, and then Michelle had left too, because she had only ever worked, for him for 8 years and didn't answer to anybody else in this company. So I guess they brought in someone else who wasn't the same anymore, and she decided she wanted to leave. So he called me up and said, I left. Well, Michelle's left too now. And he goes, remember Michelle? I was like, yeah. And he said, well, you are never going to get an opportunity like this again. You are starting a management company. I'm like, I am? I'm like, I got like 1,000 units. How the heck can I do that? It's like, I'm telling you, you got to talk to her. And the rest is history. And it just so happened by coincidence, she lives not far from me. And we started meeting up and talking about it, and, whether she was willing to start a company from scratch and all that. And we just worked our way into it. And, once we got to that stage and did it, it was amazing to me that, how much I knew we could do better with our own management, but I didn't realize how bad it really was until Michelle took over and uncovered the same things on every property as we took them back from third party one at a time. It was kind of like the same issues, the same problems on every property, that I didn't even notice. And then, and at the same time, things like reducing expenses, raising occupancy, raising, just income, everything would just all happen in an exactly set time.
Mm-hmm.
Each property was identical.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, right? So,
Yeah.
but what I always find amazing, and this is what this podcast is for, right? We talk to experienced operators, people that are in the field and doing the job, and the stories are identical. It's just so incredible that we're all going through the same process, right? You start when in very, very small percentage start with their own property management right out of the gate, right? So we're all told, oh, you got to get to 1,200 units, 1,500 units before you can justify a management company. And we go with third party, and we all have the exact same issues. And like you said, at the bottom line, they're only as good as the regional and the on-site team that they hired for your properties. And still, a property management company needs checks and balances and processes and procedures, and making sure that just because they have a book doesn't mean that the people in the field actually go follow that book, right? So same challenges we keep hearing over and over and over from all of our different operators, and we've been hit with the exact same thing. And I like how you said at some point you just get a little push, right? That pushes you over the threshold. And that's what happened to us at the beginning of the year, just before the whole COVID blew up, right? We got that push, and we took over and created our own management company. I found a regional just like you did, and she's our VP of operation now. And I'd love to hear from you, Michelle, a little bit about your perspective, right? You've been in the industry for so long. How come that all those property management have those exact same issues, right? Because you've seen that. right? You pick up properties from third-party management, and they all have the exact same challenges over and over. I'd love to hear your perspective with all of your experience about that.
I mean, I think my perspective on it is that when you are a huge operator of a management company, like these large property management companies, you know, you're just a number. You just become a number to them, you know, because I've worked for the large property management companies. And I think part of the problem is that, like you said, there's not enough oversight on the properties to be able to determine, you know, why, you know, like we have a property right now that we are purchasing from a large management company, and they're giving away 1 month free on this property. 1 month free rent in this market. I haven't seen that in 7 to 10 years. No concessions, you know, but they can't lease the apartments. And so they try to just tell they tell the owners what they think an owner's going to believe. And so they say, oh, well, the market's dictating a 1 month concession. And most owners don't look into that because they don't have the time. They're trusting the operators of the management to be telling them what's really going on in the market or operation wise. And they just don't. You know, I think what I always tell Steve is I feel like a lot of these large companies have the gift of the gab, but they don't walk the walk. They talk the talk real well. You know, I'm sure you've experienced it where they tell you everything that you want to hear, but the numbers never show the results.
Mm-hmm.
Or when the occupancy isn't getting up there, they all of a sudden have these excuses. They have like a list of excuses that they pick from, you know, to justify why you're not at so-and-so occupancy. You know, I mean, this is what we.
You know, Steve had a property that we took over management on, and they were having an occupancy issue. And this management company kept telling Steve that the reason for the occupancy issue was that they weren't getting qualified traffic in the door. On day one, my regional maintenance supervisor went out there and walked all the vacant units. The reason why they couldn't increase the occupancy was because they had 21 down units on the property that Steve knew nothing about.
Yeah.
They lied. On the rent roll, it says that there was no non-revenue units.
Yeah.
And there was all these units they were taking things over to fix other ones. The things, we had plenty of money in the bank, so I don't know why they were doing that.
And so within 30 days,
keep an eye on them.
Within 30 days, we turned those units, got them occupied, and increased the income by $20,000 just on those 12 units.
Yeah. We've had that as well. When we took over, we found residents that were told there's no parts. We ordered the parts, and it's like at the same time the parts are in the shop, right? It's like it's right there. So I feel it comes from a place where, like you said, oversight. If there's no oversight, if there's no one caring, right? Right before we took over, we got to the point that we were actually going through each unit ledger. And like you said, Steve, that's not asset management, right? So when I got to that point, I said, okay, so if I'm doing all that work, why do I have to pay someone else to do that, right? Right. So that was one of those little points of push, like you mentioned earlier, for us. So one of the things that I've noticed, and that's, like we said earlier, they're only as good as the regional and the people on site that they hire. What is some of your philosophy about hiring, right? Because it's a very unique industry, to be honest, right? We buy properties that are millions and millions of dollars, and then we hand over the keys to a manager on site that has a salary base of $50,000, $60,000 or even less sometimes, right? So how do you hire? What's important to you when you hire an on-site manager, for example, or regional? How do you make sure you get the right people in?
Well, I'm going to tell you first off that Michelle is perfect to answer this and explain, because I'll tell you from an operator point of view that she knows. We joke about this all the time, because every time I go and tour a property that I'm interested in buying, and it's like a running joke now. She's like, are you going to tell me that you like the manager, right? And I'm like, yeah, she seems really good. She seems such, and then, you know, and it always turns out it's like, okay, she's shit, and that, you know, they just telling me what I want to hear, even, you know, just looking at a property, because they just want to keep their job, kind of thing. And we never keep them. And Michelle always points out to me why things that they say and do that they were totally lying and making up stuff. So go ahead.
I mean, I think unfortunately a lot of it is experience of interviewing people. You know, for people that don't have that experience, it becomes harder to determine what is a good manager and what's a bad manager. I've interviewed them for 31 years and regional managers that it's slightly easier for me. We do have a test that I require managers to take because they, you know, in an interview will tell you they know everything. But when you ask them to give you the formula to calculate cash flow and it's on a test, I'm telling you 9 times out of 10, a manager can't tell you where cash flow comes from. And it's, you know, total income minus total operating expenses minus your capital equals cash flow. It's pretty simple. But I think a lot of people, what I find is they're really good at interviewing, kind of like a management company is really good at telling you what they think you want to hear. Mm-hmm. That's how a lot of interviewees are. And so I think bottom line, it's, you know, you got to get down to testing them and putting it, you know, on paper what they know.
Yeah. So what would be a red flag for you in an interview?
There's so many.
I know. Give us a few.
A huge red flag to me is somebody that's texting or talking on their phone or answering phone calls because that's what they're going to do all day long at work. That just irritates me to no end. You don't know how many times I'm in an interview and somebody is texting or answering their phone. It's insanity.
During the interview?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. That's a huge red flag. Again, the yes ma'ams, the yes ma'am, oh yes ma'am, I can reduce your delinquency. But then I say, tell me how you're going to reduce my delinquency. And they start fumbling. You know, you got to watch out for that yes ma'am, yes ma'am, yes ma'am. Just like we talked about with a management company, they know how to yes sir you, where you think, wow, this person really knows what they're talking about, but they don't.
Yep.
They're just used to the gift of the gab, but they can't walk the walk. I mean, I'm adamant about that, you know.
Yeah, that's good. We've gotten to the point, and most of our properties are in a smaller town, so there's just not a lot of depth in the talent pool. So right. We got to the point that when we hire someone, they start on a 1099. We don't bring them on board for the first 30 days until they prove themselves, because we literally have to send people home after a few days or after a week. They tell you, yeah, I can do this, I can do that, and that's true to maintenance and office. It's kind of I can do this and I can do this, and then you get to the reality, and it's kind of like they don't know how to do it.
Right, and on the maintenance end, we also have a test they have to take. Because yes, they do the same thing. Yeah, I can fix air conditioners and they have their EPA certification, but you tell them to go out and fix one, they don't know how.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, you got to test people, you know, and I did, you know, Steve had a friend that owned a small property in a small town here in Georgia, and he could not find a good manager. And I gave him my test and he said, wow, that was phenomenal. I found somebody that could pass the test and she worked out well for him. You know, because again, people like to talk the talk.
Yep, that's absolutely true. Okay.
That sort of leads into one other thing too about, I just wanted to say, this is why I do a lot of these panel discussions at I don't know if you've been to the IMS event.
Mm-hmm. IMN?
In IMN, in New York and in Chicago I did, and Santa Monica. And the panel that I've been mostly doing or asked to be on was about the difference between having third-party management or your own, and that's what the discussion is about. So I'm sort of used to talking about that, and you know, it's so. The first thing I always tell people is, because it's misleading, and the first thing I say is, I just want to make it clear, we're not saying that you should just go out and say, hey, I'm a management company now. You should, if you're talking about starting your own management company, what we're saying is to find someone and bring someone in to operate the company that knows what they're doing, not that you do. And this also goes back to interviewing staff. And unfortunately, property operators like us, I mean, of course, you know, we talk to staff, we, you know, if we think they suck, we're going to say something, but, you know, but at the same token is we don't see them and talk to them every day. So we just meet them once and like they tell you what you want to hear. And we think they're a nice person and that's that. But we don't really know what they like to work with or how they're doing their job every day. So it's run by emotions. So it's like anybody else. If I meet anybody once, they could, I could instantly like them and they all nice. And the second I walk out the door, they start cursing me out behind my back. I mean, you don't know. But when Michelle has to work with them and speak to them every day. And the number one thing is actually see their performance every month. That's it. If they don't perform, then
they got to go.
You got to go. Yes. Michelle's pretty strict on that one.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that was a real challenge for me to kind of think through was how do I handle compliance, right? Because there's so many fair housing rules and regulations and all kind of things that you have to, and HR stuff, right, that you have to worry about. And I think that you hit it on the nail, and it's finding that right person to lead the whole venture of creating your own property management company. And when I was interviewing for my VP of operations, I told all the candidates, I'm not looking for a number 2. I'm looking for a number 1, right? I want someone that can come in, set this thing up, and then become my number 1, so I don't have to be in the property management day to day. And not that I kind of threw the keys over the fence, so that never works, right? I'm still in the trenches because we're still only a few 6 months in, right? But I hired the person that I felt that at some point I'll be able to take a step back and let her run the show. So what do you guys do when it comes to compliance? How do you keep your people up to date with fair housing and all this kind of stuff? Because a lot of the people will have the same hesitation I had with, well, just how do I do all that?
Well, we have an HR director that handles all of that for us and keeps us in compliance and sends out all of the latest and greatest laws on everything. So, I mean, that's something that we have a department that does that for us.
Okay, and do you guys use certain online classes for fair housing?
Yes, Grace Hill.
We're using Grace Hill as well. Okay.
Grace Hill's good because they have to get their certificates. So if you ever have a lawsuit, like a fair housing lawsuit, it's awesome that all of your people have taken the fair housing class. And that is just such a great way to document all of that if you ever get yourself into that situation.
Yeah. Okay.
Which you will. You will.
Yeah. It's not an if, it's a
Don't
when.
think you're immune to it.
No, nobody is. We actually found that there are certain people that would call and try to trap our people.
Right.
Like
they have professional shoppers that do that to see if you're going to violate fair housing.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about actually people trying to trap you so they can sue you.
Yeah, they make a living out of it.
Yeah. That's
same with other lawsuits on your properties. They're so savvy to it. They go out and trip on a curb and sue you and say they broke their ankle. Yeah, you're always going to have those folks. We had one at a property the other day that was the entire living seal down, tried that it fell on them and injured them. But we got real smart with that and hired an engineer to say that they pulled it down. Yeah. And they really did.
Yeah.
It's crazy what people will do. And I think a lot of times that's what scares people to open their own management company is they don't know how to handle fair housing, lawsuits, liabilities, but if you hire somebody like myself that's been in the industry for 31 years, I know how to handle all of those issues for Steve.
Yeah. And good insurance.
Yes. Always have good insurance and make sure you don't let your insurance lapse.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hindsight, Steve, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but would you start management, your own management day one, or would you still go through the process of starting with third party and then transitioning?
I would still start with third party because I think in a way you don't have a choice when you're starting, especially if you're going to jump right in and buy 100 units plus. It sounds too daunting I remember first property bought, actually one Michelle was talking about, Parkside Crossing back in 2015. It was 250 units. And I had been looking at smaller properties first over my first year of due diligence before we bought. So we'd be looking at like 20 and then 30, 40, 80, 100. Then I thought, I got myself psychologically up to the point where I felt like I already owned all those smaller properties. So nope, now I'm going to buy 100. And then I ended up buying 250. And the first time you go to a 250 unit property and you've never owned a property before, I couldn't even find my way around. I felt like I was lost. And then now, of course, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but at the time it was like, holy crap, what the heck have I done? But I think without having third-party management first, you don't learn what you're doing wrong or what they're doing wrong. So I think it's really important to still learn from it. It's not like they don't have any idea what they're doing. They're just not, like I said, totally aligned with your goals. And but they're not, if you get a decent one that's recommended or whatever, they're not like terrible, like they don't have any idea. You learn a lot from seeing what's going on and how it evolves, maybe at least over the first year. And then, you've got to have something to compare it to when you finally do your own thing and you've got someone pointing out what's wrong and showing you the proof in the pudding of how it can be. So I think it's important to learn, I'm not going to say the wrong way first, but just not the most efficient way.
Yeah, well, when we start out, you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's one of the biggest challenges.
And trial by fire is not the best way either.
Yes, but I don't know if I would recommend anybody to wait until they're, at the financial threshold, which is somewhere around the 1,200, 1,500 units. Mm-hmm. I would say as soon as you feel comfortable professionally to handle that, even if it means you make an investment, and in the first year you're going to be negative cash on or net loss on your management company, it's still worth it.
Well, that's a good point, actually, because a lot of people seem to think, not operators, but other people seem to think like, especially investors, oh, well, you're making 4% management and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, and you're trying to explain to them that we don't make any profit. It's 4% or whatever it is. That's in line with the market. And not to mention, we don't have all these extra fees in there that we're charging and taking advantage of, like other third parties do. And that really mount up. I was shocked when I realized what they were charging me for all these, stealth fees and things. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just such a big.
Well, it's not only that. It's kind of like you look at the math, right? What you charge for the management and the amount of brain damage that management generates. It's not a good business. I really don't see how third-party management do. And that, I guess, is part of the reason why they don't do such a great job, because if they'll actually put all the time required, they're not going to make any money.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, again, that's what I tell, especially investors. Our management entity is really a loss leader. And what it does is really enable us to run each of our I consider every property as a separate business. Obviously, we have some crossover investors and some different in every property. So you want, it's not like having a portfolio where some are up and some are down. You want every property's got to perform good. Yeah. So we're not worried about making money with that. We're trying to just make each property run more efficiently by having that in-house service. So it's really a service to our investors, if anything, not anything making money for me.
Yeah. I like the way you phrased it. It's a loss leader. It's not a it's not a profit center. It really is not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Michelle, tell us a little bit about the things that you guys like to do on your properties for the residents, right? Like, do you do any events, any parties, any promotions, or what do you do to kind of increase retention? I guess that's what I'm really looking for.
Well, we did until COVID-19 hit. Now all of that has ceased and desisted. But yes, I mean, we do, weekly, like once every 2 months, we'll do like a whole week of resident appreciation week, where we do a different event every day of an entire week for the residents. We do pool parties, we do Christmas parties. Every holiday, we definitely do something for the residents. We have our staffs have really great relationships with all of our residents, and that comes from Steve down to me, down to them. I mean, we believe that the residents are paying everybody's salaries. The residents are, making the properties perform financially, so, I mean, we, even during COVID-19, we don't have a lot of delinquent residents on our properties, and we have not changed our operations at all during the whole pandemic. And I think it's our residents like us and respect us, and we give them that back also.
Yeah, so I'll give you a few examples of what I'm looking for, right? So, for example, we used to do pre-COVID back to school parties. So we would actually reach out to a few vendors like a hairdresser and local pizza shops and other vendors and bring them in so the kids would get free haircuts, right? It's the little things that we like to do. We usually towards the end of the year where there is a challenge, usually a bigger challenge with collections because C-class residents somehow prefer to buy gifts over paying rent.
Right.
Hey, Amazon didn't get big from nothing,
That is still weird, but it is what it is. So we used to incentivize them, like giving away movie tickets. That's another thing that due to COVID. Movie tickets, and we would raffle big LED TVs. So do you have any of those little things that you guys are doing that are not just the usual pool party, Christmas party?
Yeah, I mean, we do all of those kind of events. Every property does different things depending on the manager and the residents at the property. If we have a property that has a large profile of children, then yes, we'll do like Easter egg hunt for the kids, or, yes, back to school. We'll kind of do like what Channel 3 News here in Atlanta does, Stuff the Bus. We do like donations for school supplies for the kids on the property. We do all like that kind of charity stuff for the residents also. Yes, we do.
That's awesome.
That's another thing about having good staff as well. You can always tell good manager when they need to be firm but still approachable from the tenant's point of view and seem to be doing things at that end. A lot of them really get into their work and have these things that they've done in the past that they like to do, and they bring on board ideas of those sort of events. And you can tell the ones that really get into it and like keeping the tenants really happy.
Yeah, it's like I said, every property is different based on the staff and the profile, and but all the managers have their own unique ways of what they do, and they're all interesting and good. Like it's fun to watch what they do every month.
Yeah, that's really great, and it comes from a place of caring, I guess, right? If you have the right manager and they care about the resident, then they will bring up those suggestions. They will ask for a budget to do something. And we always encourage our managers to think that way, right? Take care of your residents. And if you need to fight for someone, come in and fight for someone, right? You'll never be punished for defending your resident or advocating for your residents, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. So let's talk a little bit, because I know you're very much like a lot of operators. You buy properties that are underperforming and you're trying to add value. So we're going to look at both sides of the equation, right? Increasing revenue and reducing expenses. Let's start with the revenue side. Give us a few examples of things that you guys like to do that is not the usual raise rents, right? Because that's the easy one, right? Give us a few examples.
I mean, on a lot of the properties we take over, they're not billing back all the utilities, and we bill back all utilities: water, sewer, trash, pest control. A lot of the properties we take over don't bill back any of that. Day of takeover, all concessions are eliminated. We do not do concessions. I mean, literally, we're taking over a property that has like, a ton of concessions year to date, and it's just not necessary if you have the right staff on the property. And it's all going to go back to that, like you said. It's going to go back to having the right people in the office that are going to increase your income and reduce your expenses. So the utilities, concessions, and the one thing I tell all of our staff members that will fix any property is vacancy loss. You reduce your vacancy loss on the day of takeover, within 30 days, you're going to see your income increase hugely, and your expenses are going to decrease. You're not paying vacant utilities. You don't have to turn that unit. It's occupied. It's just getting back to the basics of property management that really solves all operational income issues.
Yeah, that's pretty much calling it. Okay, Steve, do you have any examples that you can think of?
Well, in general, I mean, what Michelle's saying, I mean, I always say one of our main things, we have, or I have 3 things I look for or do to raise value. When you say value add, it's always a bit sort of open-ended, or what is value add? And a lot of people that don't know, if you're adding value, they think you're building something, or, like doing interiors or renovations. But in reality, it's just anything that makes it more valuable. Mm-hmm. So my strategy when I buy is, number 1, of course, is just buying right. If you don't buy it right and pay the right price in the first place, you're just dead in the water anyway. And number 2, really the biggest thing that adds value is management efficiency. And that's a combination of reducing expenses and, raising your utility basis. I mean, we take over some properties and they are charging for water, but they're only getting, recouping like 50%. We can get that up, over, probably maybe it takes a 9-month turnover to get it up to, near 100% of the, the tenant used water. Mm-hmm. That's huge. You could add millions on a big property in capitalized income. So it really is just mostly that type of thing. I always say it's mostly a management play. And then any work we do is extra. We might upgrade 25% of the units or do some, slighter upgrades on all units as we turn, but most of it is just getting to grips with it right away. We know in advance. You know in advance when you're buying a property what things need to be fixed, and if you have someone to implement them, then you can turn it around quickly. And really, it's not specific things; it's a combination of those things. Just lowering any expenses that aren't correctly, being charged correctly, and really it's a lot of it's just collecting the income, training the tenants. Good manager knows how to, retrain the existing tenants and train the new ones as they come in, so that they know you collect on time. We file on whatever the 10th of the month, things like that. So training them and having a more systematic approach to collections and everything is really a huge difference.
Absolutely. And you kind of touched on reducing expenses. So let's talk about reducing expenses. Where do you guys find the most value of, if I do this, I get that much reduction in expenses, right? So what are the big stones in expense reductions?
I have to say that one of the biggest misconceptions in property management is that utilities are a non-controllable expense. And they are controllable. And that is where most of your money is going out the window. If you start to see that your water bill is increasing, don't ignore it. Get somebody out there. We have a regional maintenance director, so I monitor the monthly utility bills on every property. And if I see a water bill is starting to climb up, I send him out there, and 9 times out of 10, there's a leak on that property somewhere. And most people don't do that, and then it goes from 11,000 to 15,000 to 20,000, and then oh my God, the water bill's now 20 grand. It used to be 11. What's going on? If you catch it right away when you start to see that increase happening, another thing is vacant utilities, whether it's gas or electric. My managers walk those once a week, every vacant unit, to check for mold or check for leaks and to make sure all the utilities are not cut off because you need power for the refrigerator. But the air conditioner's not blasting on 50 degrees all day and night for 30 days straight, so you have to have somebody that's monitoring those vacant bills and all of your utility bills, because I'm telling you, we save, I had a property last month that the water bill did go from 11,000 to 15. And I immediately called the regional maintenance director and said, you need to get out there. Guess what? The bill's back down to 11 again.
Yeah.
We caught it immediately. There was leaks on the property. I think everybody that has ever trained me in this industry says utilities are a non-controllable expense. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's one of the biggest controllable expenses. Really, It is. Another thing is advertising. We're buying a property in the next 30 to 60 days where this company has spent year to date $85,000 on advertising.
Oh my
I've never
God.
seen anything
Do
like
you
it.
know that on our properties, we spend zero on advertising because I have the right employees that know how to market, they know how to lease. You know, I always tell everybody an apartment is a box. You know, it's just a box that you're selling. They're all pretty much the same. It's the people. You know, people lease an apartment because of the person that they're dealing with, the customer service they're getting, you know, how that person made you feel. I am a huge proponent about how, you know, first impressions and how you make somebody feel the first time they meet you. And if you're on your phone and you're texting and they're waiting and they're wanting to see an apartment, they're like, I'm out of here. You know,
Yeah.
so if you have the right people, you don't, you know, and I find that these third-party management companies, and this is a third-party managed property, you know, instead of looking at the staffing, because they've turned the staffing over 3 times already, the entire staff. And instead of like going, okay, we got a major staffing problem here, they're telling the owner we need to spend $85,000 on advertising.
This was the one that we mentioned before, earlier on in the conversation, that was having trouble with the occupancy. This is
The
their
1 month
idea
free.
of fixing it. You know, spend more
Yeah.
of the owner's money.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I don't even know what they're spending $85,000 on, but
I want to know. I've asked the broker, can you please give me a breakdown? Because out of curiosity, I just need to know, you know,
Yeah,
for my
it's
own
crazy. I
giggles.
mean, we do a
over it.
website, but we have a website that's, you know, from a company that, you know, as soon as we know we're taking over, they get it ready. That's the only thing we do, pretty much.
That's it.
Might do some minor
so
stuff,
we
but it's mostly just traffic coming in, and as Michelle said, just having good staff that can
yeah,
talk
when
to
we took over one of our properties, they were using apartments.com and they were paying like $1,000 a month for this thing.
Yeah.
And then when we drove into the ROI, it was just not there. It wasn't generating any traffic. And there were bills and bills and bills from apartment list, for example. And just turns out if they visited apartment list website at some point, and then they showed up on your property, it might be unrelated, they just drove by. You're still getting charged for the lead because apartment lists kind of logged them first. And stuff like that we eliminated immediately.
That's one of the things you find out about from, you know, the hard way from third-party management. They're spending $1,000 a month of my money on apartments.com, and then you don't think anything about it for a long time until you say, you know what, I'd like to see, can you show me the analytics from that? And then they go, oh, gee, we don't have any leases from apartments.com. And you're like, why am I still spending $1,000 a month? Oh, I don't know. That's third-party management.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So we, you know, we also have a media company that builds multifamily websites, right? Because we kind of feel we cracked the formula, layout, templates, and so on, to the point that we get about 5-6 leads, organic leads a day, coming to our property website and put in all the information, look for an apartment. And this is every property, every day, organically. We don't spend a dime on it.
Same with us.
One of the things that we also learned is that because we also have a brokerage, right? We got a fully vertically integrated organization. We also have a brokerage. So we put our apartments on the MLS. Well, the MLS propagates to hundreds of different websites, including Realtor.com and Zillow and Apartment List and Zamper and all these guys. So we get leads through those for free. So why pay Apartment List if they're going to give you a free lead just because you put it on the MLS?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another way that we found that we can get a lot of different leads and use them without paying for it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, so I want to be conscious of everybody's time when you look back a little bit, right? And if you know, you could go back in time to a younger self, right? And what would you tell yourself? And let's assume you can't tell yourself that 2009 would be the bottom, buy anything you can put your hands on, right? Short of that, what advice would you give yourself, your younger self?
Well, I certainly wish I got into it much earlier. I mean, I have been involved in real estate since, you know, about 20 years now, and, you know, more doing development and other stuff along the, just about everything along the way, buying and selling commercial property, stuff like that. But I really didn't know 100% about, how great multifamily was till 5 or 6 years ago. And then I just decided to do that 100%. And I wish I did that way before that. It's just a great business, and it's much safer than doing spec building and, things like that. It's just, as long as you learn how to operate them properly, it's a great business model.
That's great.
I wish I did it a long time ago.
Okay. So we're recording this at the end of July of 2020. It'll be a miss not to mention COVID, right? And we kind of mentioned it a little bit along the way, but how did COVID impact your operations? I think I heard Michelle say that you changed nothing in the operations. Did you stay fully open? Did you do any work orders, even the small ones? How did you guys adjust, and how did your residents adjust?
When the COVID first hit, Steve called me panicking, and I fully understand. I was a little rattled myself, but I'm like the calm one, So when it hit, and everybody, has their opinions, and there's so many people that want to say, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. And you know what I said to Steve? I said, Steve, I'm going to continue to operate like normal. And I'll adjust if I have to as we go along, but I'm just not going to listen to all this rhetoric that's going on, that I keep hearing, So, absolutely, we put, safeguards in place. All our offices are open. We do full work orders, because part of my problem was, on a 348 unit property, if we hadn't been doing work orders since February and it's now July, can you imagine? We'd never dig out of that hole, and the residents would be miserable, and we'd be devaluing the property by not fixing these items. Mm-hmm. So, at the beginning of it, I just told Steve, I'm going to run it like normal, but we're going to require our employees to wear masks. Maintenance have to wear gloves and masks. We're going to sanitize. We're going to close down all the common areas, such as the pool, the fitness center, blah, blah, blah. And I'm happy to say at the end of July, I have not had one employee or one resident that has had COVID-19.
That's great. We kind of had to minimize to emergency only work orders for a little while. I think that was like March, April, and some of May. And then when things started calming down a little bit, we kind of went back and because like you said, it builds a backlog. And if you don't catch up on it, it can be a real problem. So it took us a little while, but we're finally kind of caught up on all that backlog. And we never closed the office because your residents still service, right? Mm-hmm. They still need service. They still need attention. You still need to renew leases. You still need to lease apartments and show. So yes, we adjusted. We had masks and sanitizing, and we did virtual tours to anybody that wasn't comfortable to do an in-person tour. But overall, we're an essential business. We got to keep operating. We have people to take care of that lives in those apartments. You can't really shut it down.
No.
Right.
And of course, it is communication as well, though, with the tenants. I mean, of course, we had asked tenants and put notices out and said, please, don't call if it's not something that is really that important. So we have would like a bit of tenant cooperation, on that side too. I mean, don't come in the office unless you really need to. Don't call us because to change your light bulb or something ridiculous. I mean, come on. So it's a bit of common sense, I think, in communication.
Yeah, and sometimes we had to have that conversation with the residents. Kind of like, look, it's not an emergency. We're not just trying to protect our team member. We're also trying to protect you and everybody else in the community, right? Because if our maintenance team is walking in and out of unit all day long, if one of them gets sick, he can get the entire complex sick, right? So it was also protecting them. So like you said, a lot of communication that was going on with the residents to help them understand. A lot of them are very sorry that we can't open the pools just yet. Especially here in Texas, it gets hot. Yeah. But it is what it is, and we got to follow the city code and all the instructions. It's definitely different, right? Caught everybody by surprise, and we'll all have to adjust in some way to the situation. So I'll just ask one last question. Is like, what's next for your organization, right? What's the plans? Are you guys still buying in 2020? Are you planning on development? Where are you going forward?
We're still sticking with, what we do, which is, mostly specializing in a more of a C, C to B, C plus to B minus sort of demographic. That seems to be our, niche specialization sort of market, which is what we're used to dealing with. And we weren't doing anything for the first couple of months or more, like most people weren't. No one really knew what to expect, what's going on. It felt like the market shut down, as far as buying and selling and stuff. Everyone pulled out of deals that we know that were under contract, things like that. But lately, things have seemed to pick up a little bit. I've been weighing up what I think, listening to industry news, economic news, and trying to, feel my way through what my opinion is. At the end of the day, I think there is a, good justification for buying if their price, risk-adjusted pricing, which I don't see a lot of at the moment, but we are buying. So we have a 93 unit we're closing on next Tuesday. That just sort of came up, and that actually was on the market quite a while, pre-COVID, and they had offers on it in the 80s a door, and we're buying it for 69 a door because the guy decided he wanted to sell it, and everybody pulled out, and I said, yeah, we'll do that for the right price, so that it's priced in, any downside. And of course, the upside is, a lot of it on my plan right now buying is that hopefully, even in 2 years from now, we're back to income-related cap rates and pricing based on that. So hopefully we'll gain something from that. Plus, it's got management efficiencies. And then we got another 260-unit property, which we're closing on in about, somewhere between 45 to 60 days. And that's been a great deal as well, really great property. Where we already have a property, the one that Michelle said that we're taking over, it needs a lot of management efficiency, run by a big management company. Meanwhile, we have a property on the same road as that's inferior, and our rents are higher, and we're 100% occupied. So they have no excuse.
Yeah,
so
I know
we're buying, but close.
That's the best purchases, right? When you have a proof that you can do better, right? It's way lower risk that way. Awesome. So it sounds like it's onward and upward for you guys. That's fantastic. I want to take a minute and say thank you for both of you taking the time today and being on the show. If anybody wants to reach out to you guys and find you, maybe invest in one of your deals, how can they find you? And we'll put links in the show notes for all of that.
Sure. Well, our website is just www.crownbaygroup.com. You can go on there. I think, our email's on there, info@crownbaygroup.com. Anybody's, welcome to send me an email or send a message through there or directly on the email to get in touch with me, and I'll get back in touch with you, or we can get on a call or whatever the case may be. That's really the best way. We also have an investor tab on there as well on our website. You can click on that, which takes you to our investor portal, which we actually just really got up and running during COVID. We thought it's a good time. Let's do something proactive here. So let's get that. We got that just up and running, and the first deal is actually on there now. And if you click on that, you can actually see all the documents and downloadable items.
Awesome. Great. We'll definitely make sure we have the links in the show notes. For the listeners, thank you so much for listening to our show. We appreciate if you can take some time and go to iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast, and leave a review for us. 1 star, 5 stars, whatever stars you feel is right for us. We'll appreciate it. Our website is APTOPR, where you can watch all of the shows, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our show. If you want to enjoy more episodes, please subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. For questions or feedback, please visit our site at www.aptopr.com.